Welcome to True Crime Untold Cases. I'm your host, Harper Quinn. Christmas Eve, 1945. The Sodder family of Fayetteville, West Virginia, tucked their 10 children into bed, looking forward to a joyous holiday morning. But for 5 of those children, this would be their last night in the Sodder home. What began as a mysterious midnight fire would evolve into one of America's most baffling disappearances, with missing ladders, cut phone lines, strange visitors, and most disturbingly, not a single trace of human remains in the ashes. Were the 5 Sodder children killed in that blaze, or did something far more sinister occur on that cold December night? Let's dive into this chilling mystery. On a cold Christmas Eve in 1945, in the quiet town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family went about their usual evening routine, unaware that this night would become one of America's most enduring mysteries. George and Jennie Sodder, along with 9 of their 10 children, were preparing for what should have been a joyous Christmas celebration. Their home, a 2-story wooden frame house, sat along State Route 19, where George ran a successful coal trucking business. That evening, Maurice, age 14, Martha, age 12, Louis, age 9, Jennie, age 8, and Betty, age 5, begged their mother to let them stay up late and play with their new Christmas toys, a doll that had been given to them as an early present. Jennie Sodder reluctantly agreed, knowing it was a special night. The older children, John, 23, George Jr., 16, and Marion, 17, were already settled in their rooms, while 2-year-old Sylvia slept near her parents. Around 12:30 a.m., Jennie was awakened by the telephone ringing. She made her way downstairs in the darkness to answer it. On the line was a woman asking for someone Jennie didn't know. In the background, she could hear what sounded like laughter and glasses clinking. The caller seemed to have dialed the wrong number. Jennie hung up and turned to head back upstairs when she noticed something unusual. The lights were still on and the curtains weren't drawn. More concerning was that the door was unlocked, something George was usually fastidious about checking. As she secured the house for the night, Jennie heard what she would later describe as a heavy thud on the roof, followed by a rolling sound. She dismissed it at the time, but this detail would later haunt her. She returned to bed, only to be awakened again around 1:30 a.m. by the smell of smoke. The fire spread with terrifying speed. Smoke and flames were already filling the house when Jennie woke up. She immediately called out to her children. John, Marion, and George Jr. managed to escape the burning house. George Sodder helped his wife and their toddler Sylvia to safety. But the 5 middle children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty, were nowhere to be seen. George's first instinct was to reach for the ladder he always kept against the house to reach the upper windows, but it was mysteriously missing. He then tried to start his coal trucks, thinking he could drive them to the house and use them as an improvised ladder to reach the upper windows, but neither truck would start, despite having worked perfectly the day before. The family watched in horror as their home burned. George attempted to scoop water from a rain barrel, but found it frozen solid. The fire department, located just 2.5 miles away in Fayetteville, didn't arrive until 8 a.m., a full 7 hours after the fire began. Fire Chief F.J. Morris would later claim that they couldn't find the house, despite George Sodder being a prominent businessman in the area and the house being on a main route. By morning, their home was reduced to ash. Initially, authorities concluded that the 5 missing children had perished in the fire, suggesting that the intense heat had completely cremated their bodies. However, this explanation didn't satisfy George and Jennie Sodder. They knew that human bones don't completely disintegrate in a standard house fire, and the temperature required for complete cremation is much higher than what a house fire typically reaches. The official investigation was brief and, in the Sodders' opinion, inadequate. Fire Chief Morris conducted a cursory examination of the site and declared that the fire had been caused by faulty wiring. However, George remembered that the Christmas lights had been on when they went to bed and continued working even after the fire had started in another part of the house. Moreover, George had recently had the wiring checked by a professional who declared it safe. As the Sodders began to piece together the events of that night, more suspicious details emerged. A few months before the fire, a stranger had appeared at the house, pointing to the fuse boxes and saying, "This is going to cause a fire someday." Another man had attempted to sell the family life insurance, becoming angry when George declined, and allegedly warning that their house would go up in smoke and their children would be destroyed. The telephone lines to the house had been cut, not burned, as discovered later. A witness reported seeing someone throwing fireballs at the house. Perhaps most disturbingly, in the months leading up to the fire, the older Sodder children had noticed a strange car repeatedly parked along the highway, its occupants watching the younger children as they returned home from school. These circumstances led George and Jennie to believe that their children hadn't died in the fire at all, but had been kidnapped, with the fire set to cover up the crime. This theory was bolstered by multiple reported sightings of the children in the years following the fire. A woman at a tourist stop in Charleston, West Virginia, claimed to have served breakfast to 4 of the 5 children about a week after the fire. A hotel owner in a nearby town reported seeing the children's photos in his lobby and insisted that they had stayed at his hotel. The most compelling piece of evidence came in 1968, when Jennie Sodder received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a photo of a young man in his mid-20s who bore a striking resemblance to how their son Louis might have looked at that age. On the back was written, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil Boys, A90132 or 35. No explanation was ever found for the cryptic message, and despite hiring a private investigator to follow up in Kentucky, where the letter had been postmarked, the lead went nowhere. The Sodders' search for answers would consume the rest of their lives. They erected a billboard along Route 16, featuring photos of the 5 children and offering a reward for information. The billboard stood for decades, a testament to their unwavering determination to uncover the truth. Continued in next message due to length. George Sodder's background added another layer of intrigue to the mystery. As an Italian immigrant who had come to America as a young boy, he had been openly critical of Benito Mussolini and the Italian fascist government. In the tight-knit Italian-American community of the 1940s, such political statements didn't go unnoticed. Some theorized that the children's disappearance might have been an act of retaliation by Mussolini sympathizers. The family's quest for answers led them to conduct their own investigation. In 1949, they hired private investigator C.C. Tinsley to look into the case. Tinsley made several disturbing discoveries. He found that Fire Chief Morris had allegedly discovered a human heart in the ashes, which he had buried in a dynamite box. When the site was excavated, the heart turned out to be beef liver, raising questions about whether evidence had been planted to support the fire death theory. Tinsley also investigated the insurance salesman who had threatened the family. The man was discovered to be a member of the coroner's jury that had helped rule on the children's deaths. This connection raised serious concerns about the integrity of the original investigation. In 1950, the family took an even more dramatic step. They hired a Washington, D.C. pathologist named Oscar B. Hunter to conduct a new search of the fire site. Hunter's team sifted through the dirt and debris, finding several small bones and fragments. However, detailed analysis revealed these were vertebrae from someone much older than any of the missing children, and they showed no signs of fire damage. This suggested they had been planted at the site after the fire. The family's investigation uncovered more witnesses who claimed to have seen the children. A woman named Ida Crutchfield came forward to say she had seen the children in a passing car early Christmas morning while the house was burning. The car was heading west on Route 16. Another witness reported seeing the same car at a roadside diner about 50 miles away. The most tantalizing lead came from a reverend who was traveling through Fayetteville in the early morning hours of Christmas Day. He reported seeing a car with Florida license plates passing by with children inside. When he learned about the fire later, he contacted police, but his statement was apparently never followed up on. As the years passed, more bizarre details emerged. A woman in Houston claimed she had overheard a conversation in a bar about a fire in West Virginia that was set to kidnap 5 children. The woman provided specific details about the Sodder case that hadn't been publicly released, but when investigators tried to locate her again, she had vanished. The family received numerous letters over the years, some offering genuine information, others cruel hoaxes. One letter writer claimed the children were living in Florida. Another suggested they had been taken to Italy. Each lead was investigated, but none provided concrete answers. In 1967, George and Jennie hired yet another private investigator who focused on the possibility that the children had been taken to Italy. The investigator reported back that the children were indeed alive and living in Italy, but demanded more money to reveal their exact location. After receiving payment, the investigator disappeared, never to be heard from again. The mysterious photograph of the supposed adult, Louis Sodder, became a focal point of the investigation. Handwriting experts analyzed the message on the back, but could never determine its meaning. The numbers A90132 appeared to be some kind of code, but despite countless attempts to decipher it, its significance remained unknown. Jennie Sodder became convinced that the photograph was genuine. She noted that the young man had the same distinctive features as her son, the same straight nose, dark eyebrows, and facial structure. The family had the photo analyzed by several experts, who agreed there were striking similarities to Louis's childhood photos. George Sodder died in 1969, still searching for answers. His last action regarding the case was to dig one final time at the fire site, still hoping to find some evidence that might explain what happened that night. Jennie continued the search until her death in 1989, never wavering in her belief that her children had survived. The case attracted national attention over the years, appearing in numerous newspapers and magazines. In 1950, the Charleston Gazette-Mail ran a series of articles about the mystery, bringing new witnesses forward. One reader contacted the paper claiming to have seen the children at a church in South Carolina, but like so many other leads, this one led nowhere. The surviving Sodder children carried on the investigation after their parents' deaths. John Sodder maintained the billboard until his death in the 1980s. Sylvia Sodder Paxton, the youngest child who survived the fire, continued to speak about the case well into the 21st century, hoping that someone, somewhere, might have information about what happened to her siblings. Modern investigators have proposed various theories about what might have happened that night. Some suggest that the children might have been taken by an organized crime syndicate involved in child trafficking. Others propose that they were taken by someone who knew the family and had been planning the abduction for months, explaining the strange incidents leading up to the fire. The timing of the fire, Christmas Eve, has led some to speculate that it was chosen deliberately, knowing that emergency responses would be slower and fewer witnesses would be around. The fact that so many things went wrong simultaneously, the missing ladder, the trucks that wouldn't start, the cut phone lines, suggests careful planning rather than coincidence. Forensic experts who have studied the case in recent years have pointed out that the fire's behavior was unusual. The speed with which it consumed the house and the complete absence of remains suggests that an accelerant might have been used. The strange sound Jennie heard on the roof could have been someone throwing incendiary devices. The case of the missing Sodder children remains one of America's most perplexing family mysteries. The question of whether 5 children perished in a Christmas Eve fire or were spirited away to an unknown fate continues to intrigue investigators and amateur sleuths. The fact that no remains were ever found, despite multiple searches of the site, leaves the door open to countless possibilities. The passage of time has only deepened the intrigue surrounding the Sodder children's disappearance. In the decades since that fateful Christmas Eve, numerous theories have emerged about possible mob connections, international kidnapping rings, and government conspiracies. One compelling theory focuses on the local community's possible involvement. Fayetteville in the 1940s was home to a significant Italian-American population, and tensions sometimes ran high during World War II. Some researchers have suggested that George Sodder's outspoken criticism of Mussolini might have made him more enemies than he realized. Several Italian-American families in the area had relatives who had suffered under Italy's anti-fascist purges, and some may have blamed vocal critics like George for encouraging American involvement in the war. The insurance salesman who had threatened the family was later identified as a man with connections to several local Italian-American organizations. When interviewed years later by private investigators, he denied any involvement, but provided contradictory accounts of his whereabouts on the night of the fire. His role on the coroner's jury raised serious ethical questions that were never adequately addressed by local authorities. Another theory that gained traction in recent years involves the possibility of a human trafficking operation. In the 1940s, child trafficking rings were known to operate throughout the Appalachian region, often targeting rural families. The highway near the Sodder home was a major route connecting several states, making it possible for kidnappers to quickly transport children across state lines. The woman who made the strange phone call to the house that night was never identified, despite extensive efforts by investigators. Some researchers believe the call was meant to verify that the family was home and to create a distraction. The sounds of revelry in the background could have been a recording, designed to mask the real purpose of the call. The role of local law enforcement has also come under scrutiny. The fire department's delayed response and the police's seemingly cursory investigation suggest either stunning incompetence or possible complicity. When Sylvia Sodder Paxton attempted to access the original police reports in the 1990s, she discovered that many key documents had mysteriously vanished from the courthouse archives. DNA testing has offered new hope for solving the mystery. In 2013, a group of forensic scientists proposed excavating the fire site using modern archaeological techniques and analyzing any recovered material with advanced DNA testing methods. However, the current property owners have been reluctant to permit such an extensive excavation. The cryptic photograph of the supposed adult Louis Sodder continues to generate new theories. Digital analysis of the image in recent years has revealed details that weren't visible in earlier examinations. The numbers on the back, A90132, match a format used for Italian immigrant documentation in the 1940s, lending some credence to the theory that the children were taken to Italy. Perhaps most intriguingly, several people have come forward in recent years claiming to be descendants of the missing Sodder children. While most have been proven false through DNA testing, one individual's claim remains under investigation. This person, who wishes to remain anonymous, has provided family stories and details about the kidnapping that align with previously undisclosed aspects of the case. The Sodder children's disappearance has become more than just a missing persons case. It represents a dark chapter in American history, touching on themes of immigration, political persecution, and justice system failures. The fact that 5 children could vanish without a trace, leaving behind no physical evidence despite multiple investigations, challenges our understanding of what's possible. Today, the site of the Sodder home is overgrown with vegetation, the billboard long since removed. But the questions remain. How could 5 children vanish without a trace? Why were so many obvious leads ignored by authorities? And perhaps most importantly, did George and Jennie Sodder's unwavering belief that their children survived have merit? The case continues to generate new leads and theories, even as the possibility of finding definitive answers grows more remote with each passing year. Yet it serves as a reminder of the importance of questioning official narratives and the power of a family's determination to uncover the truth, no matter how long it takes. As Sylvia Sodder Paxton once said, "The truth is there, somewhere. Someone knows what happened to my brothers and sisters, and someday, somehow, that truth will come out." Until then, the mystery of the missing Sodder children remains one of America's most haunting unsolved cases, a Christmas Eve tragedy that continues to challenge our assumptions about what is possible and what is true.